Still waiting on a couple of people. I think so, yeah. 2 minutes? I'll give it a minute and then we'll get started. All right, we're good to go. How is everyone? Good? Who's actually working today and who's actually come out of interest? Interest? Yeah, Louis is my biggest fan. You're both? A bit of both? So it's good. Nice, small, intimate crowd, so hopefully we'll get a little bit of interaction. My name is Michael. I'm the founder of My Chi Journey, which is a wellness company based out of Australia. I live here in Abu Dhabi and have been on and off for the last 10 years or so. My talk today will be on organic living. If you're on the kind of organic food fad, where you're always looking for the cafes that are selling organic or you're going to the organic supermarket, this is not necessarily for you. I won't be going into detail about what organic brands you should be buying and what you shouldn't be buying and all that kind of stuff. We're kind of going to look at it with a little bit more depth. So in terms of what organic living is exactly and what I mean by organic living and how it can benefit you in your everyday life. So there's a bit of a philosophy behind living organic, and it's based on 3 premises. The first is humans are natural biological beings. We're created in accordance with the laws of nature, and the earth was created in order to sustain human life. So basically, we are of the earth, and the earth is there for us. So that's the basic premise. Now, obviously, we're not just biological beings, otherwise we'll just be animals. There is kind of like a more conscious, spiritual element to us, but we won't get too philosophical about that. But the basic premise is that we are of nature, we are of the earth, and the earth is there to sustain us. 2, the further we move away from nature, the more anxious, stressed, and unhealthy we become. So the further we move away from nature, the more anxious and stressed and unhealthy we become. And 3, the more we move in closer harmony with nature, the happier and healthier we become. So they're the basic premises. Obviously, there's some philosophy there, and we can kind of sit there and discuss what I mean by each point. But that's what I'm basing the talk on today. Now, simplicity is at the heart of organic living. And by simplicity, I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later. But by simplicity, I mean really understanding the difference between needs and wants and being able to differentiate between needs and wants. And we'll talk about that. And a lot of time you hear people say, look, I need money to live. And that's kind of something that I react to a lot. And we'll talk a little bit about the need for money to live as well from a natural perspective and from an organic perspective. So getting an understanding and living in accordance with how nature intended us to live is at the basis of organic living, and that's what the talk is about today. So getting aligned with how nature intended us to live. So has anyone heard of the circadian rhythm, what it means? Circadian rhythm? Yeah? Yeah. So it's the rhythm of nature, the sunrise, the sunset, sleeping at a particular time, rising with the sunset. You know when the sun rises in the morning is when all the plants kind of open up and all the oxygen is released into the air. And if you're practicing, say, yoga or qigong or one of these practices, and you practice in the morning, then you're breathing, you're inhaling all of this, you're actually getting the benefit from it as well. So getting the body clock in rhythm and in sync with nature is what I'm talking about when I talk about the circadian rhythms. What we eat, what we consume, how we eat, physical activity, relationships. So we can talk about relationships a little bit. It's like, well, how is relationships related to organic living? Well, humans are social beings. we kind of wither away and die in isolation. So being able to maintain healthy human relationships is part of living organic. Being a part of a community or something bigger than you, I classify as part of living organic as well. So it goes well beyond just organic food and organic clothing and so forth. Any questions on any of that? Does everyone get the basic premise? The closer we are to nature, the happier and healthier we are. The further away we are from nature, the more stressed and unhealthy we become. Getting our body and our mind and everything in sync with how nature intended us to live is of benefit to you from a health perspective and just from a general kind of well-being perspective as well. Okay, the disconnection from nature. So at the kind of end of the 1800s, there was the Industrial Revolution. Factories started popping up. We started manufacturing a lot of things. A lot of the workers kind of started moving away from the cities and going to the factories to work, and they kind of left the agriculture and everything else behind. So that's when it kind of, our disconnection from nature really became accelerated. And it kind of continued on until the present day. Currently, we have the highest rates of urbanization in human history. Do we know what urbanization means? Urbanization, anyone? So urbanization is when people move away from the villages and they move away from the country and they move to the cities. At the moment, with the younger generation, nobody wants to live in the villages and in the country anymore. They all want to live in the cities. Why? Faster and easier for what? For work. People are looking for work. People are chasing money, right? So they leave their country homes, they leave their villages, and they move to the cities searching for work to be able to earn money. And we're currently experiencing the highest rates of urbanization globally in human history. So that's also contributing to our further disconnection from nature. The digital age has seen children leading more sedentary lifestyles, being less active. They're not outdoors anymore. It's contributing to rises in rates of obesity and depression. And there's studies that actually link that to disconnection from nature as well, and I've kind of cited one of the studies there. Seeing food increasingly as a commodity rather than a form of nourishment. So as a commodity, it's something that we trade with, it's something that we sell. We set up a food van or we set up a McDonald's and we have food and we want to sell it and we want to sell it fast and we want to make more money. So we see it as a business opportunity as opposed to a form of nourishment. So for example, I'm in Australia. We have a really large agricultural sector in Australia. We grow fruits and vegetables and we have beef and all kinds of stuff. So what would happen naturally in Australia is we would get all our good stuff and we would sell it to a country overseas. So Australia will have all their good fruits and vegetables and they'll sell it, say, to the UAE. So we'll export all our good fruit and vegetables to the UAE, but then we'll import something cheaper, say, from Asia. So what you're seeing is the food that's actually being grown locally is being exported, and then we're actually importing food from somewhere else. Now, the longer it takes from the food to go from the farm to your table, the less nutrients it has. It actually loses nutrients. Who's actually, say, for example, eaten a tomato or a cucumber or something straight from the farm? Has anyone had it like straight from the farm? You have? And then you have it from a supermarket? Have you ever had a cucumber from the supermarket? Is there a difference in taste? Yeah, you can taste the difference. So sometimes say a cucumber's picked on a farm somewhere, it spends, I don't know, a couple of weeks in a sorting kind of area, and then it's on a ship for another couple of months, then it's in refrigeration for another month or so, it gets to the supermarket, and then it gets to your table. And then what you're eating kind of tastes like cardboard sometimes. You kind of miss that earthy taste in it, the nature in it. And that's also an issue as well. So we're increasingly seeing food as a commodity rather than a form of nourishment. It's something to trade and make money from, as opposed to something that's going to nourish the body. Seeing clothing as fashion accessories rather than something that brings you warmth and protection from the elements. And again, there's a whole fashion industry out there, and again, I'm not being anti-anything, so don't kind of jump the gun. I'm human as well, so I kind of dabble in a lot of different things, and I have my own challenges. But clothing now has really become about fashion and about standing out or fitting in, rather than it's just there to keep me warm or a form of protection from the weather. So, and that's become increasingly so. And again, that contributes, again, from the disconnection from nature. Nature and psychology. Nature relatedness has a distinct happiness benefit. So the closer you're related to nature, the happier you are. And these are psychological studies. Connection to nature also correlated with most measures of human well-being, particularly mental health. So nature relatedness is also a predictor of happiness. So if someone spends more time in nature, you could almost predict that they're going to be happier people by psychological measures. And experts found that outdoor education is crucial for child development and the future of the planet. And by the future of the planet, they mean that the closer your relationship with nature, the more likely you are to live a sustainable lifestyle. You'll care about the environment, you'll think about the consequences of your actions on your natural environment and so forth. So there's not only a health benefit, there's also a community and environmental benefit from that connection to nature as well. And a 2005 study for the educators in the room found that children who learn in outdoor classrooms improve their science scores by 27%. So you're learning about trees, rather than sitting in a classroom and learning about trees and photosynthesis and the light and everything like that, by actually being outdoors and growing your own tree or growing your own vegetables, you're getting a richer and deeper understanding of how this cycle works. And it's actually improving your results in your science class, for example. So eco-psychology is actually a thing now. So there's an emergence of a whole new field of psychology, and it's called eco-psychology. And it studies the relationship between human beings and nature, and the effects of nature on kind of human wellness and health. So, the financial crisis and trends in sustainability. This is really interesting. So 2008, who remembers the big financial crisis? I mean, the younger kids in the room probably don't, but yeah, there was a big financial crisis. People were like calling, they'd get your money out of the bank and put it under your pillow because all the banks are going to go bust and there's going to be no money. So 2008 was the first time that this new generation probably sensed or began to think about what would the world look like without money. It's quite an interesting question. What does the world look like without money? And in 2008, I don't know if people realize or not, we were very, very close. We were very, very close to the whole financial system as we know it collapsing. So if there's no money, how does the world function? What do we do? Where is the value? And then we began to see a shift in perspective where people started to realize where the value is. And the value was where? Where is the value? If there's no money, how do we live? The money disappeared. How do we live?
Off the land.
Off the land, right, okay. Off a farm, exactly what you said. So the value is in food. It's in land being able to grow food. It's in having water to be able to grow food. It's having water to be able to drink. That's where the value is. It's not in the currency that they print in a factory, a piece of paper. And we were very, very close to experiencing this. And now there's been a bit of a shift since the financial crisis. People are starting to realize that, okay, the value might not actually just be in money or in nice cars or in nice apartments. The real value is, if we have another financial crisis, in who owns the land, who owns the source of food. And this is going to be an increasing issue as we go on as well. And for the young people in the room, hopefully we don't have another financial crisis, but if we do, or if you're thinking about long-term investments, maybe buy land near some fresh water somewhere. There's a growing general awareness of issues related to resources, and I spoke about that, food, water, basics that sustain life. And I mentioned this at the beginning as well, in terms of, people tell me all the time in my work, I can't be healthier because I got to work. I was like, well, why do you have to work? Because I need money to live. I was like, well, that's interesting, because I actually don't believe you need money to live. Technically, I don't believe that. And I think you need water to live. I think you need food to live. I think you need shelter to live. You need clothing. You need human connection. I think you need those things. Fire, maybe, you need to live. But water, you don't really need to live. Now, we've created a system where we trade with this currency called money, and it gives you access to these resources that you actually need to live. But growing your own food is like printing your own money. It's like growing your own money. There's been a rise in permaculture and permaculture education. Do we know what permaculture is? I'll put a little description up on the board there. Has anyone heard of permaculture before? No? So it started in the 70s, or it was really coined in the 70s. Obviously, people have been doing it for generations. But it's really a form of agricultural and social design that tries to emulate the ecosystem. So I could go in there on a piece of land and I could grow certain types of vegetables that grow in that climate. I'll have some fresh water. I'll introduce some bees that work in that climate because they help spread the pollen that kind of sustains this ecosystem. So this permaculture and permaculture education is now seeing a massive spike. People are actually doing courses in this kind of stuff. Some out of interest, some are trying to get connected with nature a little bit more. Some are thinking there is going to be another financial crisis of a world war, and if there is, I need to know how to run my own farm and how to grow my own food. And there's been a massive spike, especially since 2008, in permaculture and permaculture education. There's also been a rise in urban farming and urban gardening. Has anyone had any experience with urban farming or urban gardening? Do we know what it is? Come on, Lauren. Farming in the cities, exactly. So you'll go down the cities and people are actually starting community farms between the apartments, or they're growing a garden on their balcony in their apartment, or you'll see massive trees on the sides of buildings. So people that aren't able to go to nature are now bringing nature into the cities, and there's been a massive growth in urban farming and urban gardening. And a hint, which I gave you already, is that growing your own food is like growing your own money. So for the young people in the room, try growing your own food. Louis, try growing your own food. Right? It's like making money. So this is what an urban gardening and urban farming might look like. Okay, so you'll see buildings that look like this. And are there any architects or designers or anything in the room? No? Architects are now learning about this kind of stuff and how to integrate more organic principles in the design of buildings. And interior designers as well. Same thing. How do you bring in more organic materials, introduce organic elements? Now, there could be some challenges with growing a tree on the side of a building. The roots could go in there. It could ruin the infrastructure. So it could get quite technical. But because people are now moving to the cities and they're moving away from the countries, rather than thinking, hey, we should move back to nature and move back to the country, we're thinking about how can we bring nature into the cities? And there's been a bit of a shift in that as well, which is interesting. It's an interesting trend. This is a bit of urban gardening and urban farming. So, I mean, that's plastic. It's not the most organic material, but it's better than throwing it away into some landfill or something. And this would be what like a community farm might look like. Right, so you might have like 3 or 4 buildings, and the community gets together and they sit down and they said, you know what, let's start a little farm. We'll educate our kids how to sustain these plants. It'll teach them about responsibility, and you can kind of really integrate it into their education as well. And not just that, it's kind of like a source of food for everybody. So there's a TED Talk, I don't know if anyone's seen it, where some guy in Los Angeles, South Central Los Angeles, just started growing food on the sidewalks. It's a really, really good TED Talk. If anyone's interested, email me and I'll send you the link. And what people started doing, first of all, the community became a lot closer. They started to interact a lot more. But then people that were hungry, they were like, am I allowed to take this food? And he's like, of course, that's why I'm growing it. So people are like walking down the street, grabbing a tomato off the sidewalk and eating. Now, the municipality wasn't really happy with it, so they wanted to shut it down. And he's like, well, why? We've got this like little piece of, I don't know if anyone's lived in the States or in Australia or whatever else, but you've got like a sidewalk and then you've got like a patch of grass that's kind of community, it's kind of for the municipality, but the person living there is kind of responsible for maintaining it. And then you've got the street. So that little medium strip, people just started growing it, and it kind of changed the whole dynamics of the community. And you'll also find that organic food tends to be a lot more expensive. So people from lower socioeconomic areas, they can't afford organic food. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And this is a film, Growing Cities, a film about urban farming in America. If anyone's interested in it, anyone's interested in this topic, you could probably explore that a little bit further as well. But you can see what that looks like. I mean, that's kind of, there's a city there. That's the rooftop. Rooftop's actually pretty good because the sun actually comes right down on the rooftop in the mornings. All you need is a nice clean water supply, some rich soil, and some people that are willing to nurture it. And plants are living things, so they need love. You've got to give them love as well, you know. Beginning to live an organic life. So how do you bring these principles home in a practical sense? Because we don't want to just talk about theories and ideas, like what can I do? What can you do? So from farm to fork, reconnecting with your local community and supporting local where possible. So if you know someone who lives in your community that's growing food or selling food, and you can kind of have a direct relationship with where that food is coming from, reconnect with that person. Rather than buying something from Carrefour or the supermarket, or you don't know where the food's come from, start buying local again. It might be a little bit more expensive, but your body will thank you for it. Everything will thank you for it. You'll actually feel that nourishment. It'll taste different. Not just that, you're also building relationships with your local community, which I also believe nature intended for us. We are social beings and we are meant to live in communities. And now people, I don't know if it happens still here, I'm sure it does, but in the West you could be living next door to someone for 10 years and you don't even know their name. So we're increasingly isolated as well. And you'll also hear a lot, you have to do what makes you happy. It's all about you, you, you. I actually don't believe that, because I think there's a community and we should there should be some interdependence where we help each other out. And I think that's really, really important. It's kind of what nature intended for us as humans as well. So from farm to fork, reconnect with local community, local farmers. We have ripe markets here at Mushraf Park or Malay Marat Park every Saturday. Some nice produce. It's just good to go out, meet people, talk to the people selling stuff, get to know them. So try to think local a lot more. Grow your own food. Louis, this one's for you. So increase your understanding of where your food comes from. Or grow your own food, or both. So does anyone do their kind of grocery shopping, their fruit and vegetables from Carrefour? Do you know where the food comes from? No. You kind of trust Carrefour that they're selling you good stuff. And there's a food authority and they kind of put it through standards and everything like that, which is great and that's needed, and I'm sure they do a great job. But at the same time, I think for me it's important to still know where is my food coming from. How long has it been in transit before it's actually made it to the supermarket? It could be a week, it could be months. Now I know the cucumbers, there is a UAE grown cucumbers, and I always buy them, and they do taste different. I'm guessing there's a farm near Al Ain somewhere. Ahmed, do you know where they grow them? All over, yeah. So whenever I see produce from the UAE, I always try to buy it, because I know the distance it's traveled has been less, and the time it's kind of been spent in storage is actually less as well. And I'm getting more nutrients from that, so it's not just the taste. We need to see food as a form of nourishment. So who sometimes goes to kind of a hamburger joint, they go to McDonald's or whatever it is, they eat a hamburger, they're like, I feel great, and then like an hour later, I'm hungry again. Yeah, has anyone experienced something like that? You're like, I can't move, and then you're like, an hour or two later, you're like, I'm quite hungry again. Yeah, so what's happening in that sense is your body's actually not getting the nutrients from the food. So you're eating this stuff, it's food, it's getting in your belly, then the kind of your body starts to extract the nutrients that it needs, and the rest of it kind of wants to dispose of. So it's not getting many nutrients that actually benefit the body. It's getting a little bit of nutrients, and then when it's not getting the nutrients it needs, it's like, hey, I need to eat again. And then you're eating, like, why am I always hungry? I just had a great meal. I had a bucket of KFC, and I'm still hungry. I don't know why. Right, so you need to understand what nutrients you're getting. So the more natural you go, and the closer the proximity from the farm to your table, the more nutrients that are going to be in the food, and you'll eat it. And if you eat it nice and slowly, and it's kind of like mindful eating, and you allow the nutrients to kind of work through your body, then your body's going to tell you, you know what, I'm not really hungry anymore. I've got everything I need right now. And that's a healthy way of approaching your food as well. And beware the organic industry. Does anyone work in the organic industry here? I don't want to offend anybody, but it is an industry. I like the whole shift towards organic. I think it's great. But I did a trip to Thailand last year, northern Thailand, around organic living. And there were farmers there who had been farming there for hundreds of years with their families. And they made every effort to make sure that everything they grew was natural. And rather than using the term organic, they used perfectly natural. And I was like, well, why do you do that? Why don't you use organic? Well, they said, well, to use the word organic and to be certified organic, I actually have to pay a lot of money, and I can't afford to pay that money. So the farmers in northern Thailand, they're growing food and they're selling it pretty cheap as well, and they can't afford the international standard for organic, so they never get the organic certification. So what does that do? That kind of like freezes them out of the market a little bit. So the farmers that are actually trying to do good work, they can't afford this certification, and then you have people that can afford the certification, they're kind of cornering the market a little bit. And then that kind of generates a bit of a bottleneck in the supply chain. There's less of that organic food or organic certified food, and because there's less of it, it's more expensive. And it's not within access to people that from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. If you go to McDonald's and buy a Happy Meal, it's pretty... Yes, did you want to say something? Yes. Yes. It's... the term is a marketing thing. She asked, is the term organic really, really important? And I think from a legal standpoint, it is. Because if you're selling something and you put the organic label on it, you can actually be sued. Yeah, they can sue you. So it's a legal definition now. So they've taken the word organic and they've put the organic label on it and they've made it a legal thing. So if you want to sell something and promote it or market it as organic, then you need to have the right licenses. And if you don't have the right licenses, then you can't do it. Yeah, you can't. You'll go out of business. Any questions on that? Anyone want to add anything to that? So it's quite interesting how the system kind of works. Okay, conscious consumption. So by conscious consumption, I mean adopt a minimalist lifestyle. Only invite things into your life that bring joy or add some kind of value and that is eco-friendly. So you don't need a lot of stuff, right? And this leads to the second point. Now learn to differentiate between needs and wants. Has anyone thought about this? It's like, I love that bike, I need it. You want it, but do you really need it? Handbag, I need it. I need a new outfit for the wedding next week. You really need to start thinking about the difference between needs and wants and being able to differentiate with that, from that. Now, what do we actually need? What do we really, really need? I mean, it's quite a big question, a philosophical question, and there can be a lot of discussion around it. But generally speaking, from a biological, natural survival point of view, what do we need? Water, shelter, food, human connection, yeah? So they're the things we actually need if we're talking about survival. And if we're talking about thriving, then human connection, I think, and communities is really, really important because that way you help each other out and you can kind of thrive together. So really learn to differentiate between needs and wants. Next time you tell your parents or your partner or whoever it might be that I want that, I really, really need it, just think twice. Think of it as a trigger and just think twice about it. And then adopting that minimalist lifestyle is really just buying things and inviting things into your life that are the bare minimum. So to give myself a nice, comfortable life, I only need these types of things. I don't need all the extras. And all the extras, learn to donate them or get rid of them or dispose of them in a kind of friendly way. Be very mindful of the effect your purchase or behavior has on the environment, on your community and your health. So when you do something, you purchase something, just think about it. Where is this coming from? How long has this food been here? I'm buying this pair of jeans. Where was it manufactured? What kind of material is it made from? Now, I'm not wearing any organic materials today, and it really bothers me. So I'm human, and I kind of have my struggles still. And I've been really looking in the UAE for kind of, shops that sell organic type or natural materials for fashion. And by fashion, I mean like black t-shirt and some jeans and some shoes. I don't really get too fashionable these days, but it's really, really difficult to find. And you can maybe find some stuff online, and I've found some stores that don't ship here, so it's quite challenging. But even the materials that your clothing's made from, the dyes that you use in the materials, think about your children. They sleep at night on bed sheets and pillows. You maybe get them the pillow that has, some Ice Age or whatever it might be, Frozen. What's that girl's name from Frozen? Elsa? Yeah. You've got Elsa pillows for your baby, right? It looks really cute. But all those dyes are chemicals, and your baby's putting your head down on it, and they're rolling around, and they're breathing it in. Right? Clothing that you're wearing, that dyes on your clothing, it actually sits on your skin and actually goes into your bloodstream. Chemicals. So be really, really mindful about what you're purchasing, what goes into the things you're purchasing, and how it affects you, and how it affects not just you, but your community and the world as well, in terms of who's manufacturing and where. And get a better understanding of how things are produced and manufactured, which I kind of covered already. Flow with nature. Now with My Chi Journey, I think when I developed My Chi Journey as a company, it was all about getting aligned and flowing with nature a little bit. I kind of work with the concept of flow a lot. Flow is kind of like least resistance. Whatever nature's bringing, you kind of try and go with it. So spend regular time in or with nature. As often as possible, study it, understand it. Who watches the nature channel like Discovery or, yeah, it's the best, right? So I love watching the nature channels. I'm really interested in kind of like animal behavior. I'm really interested in human behavior. I'm really interested in the weather and the weather cycles and all that kind of stuff. So try to spend time, as much time as possible in nature. Get to know it, understand it, study it. And that's a really, really good way to begin getting aligned with it. Take an interest in what's happening around you and the physical world around you. If you can't go to nature, bring nature home. So start a garden at home. Next time you're out at Carrefour or wherever it might be, buy a little pot plant. See if you can raise it. See if you kill it or not. It's a good little test. It's a nice little way to start. Start really, really small. So if you can't go and spend long periods of time in or with nature, then try to bring nature home. Adopt a pet. Talk to your neighbors. Start a community garden. See if you can all kind of work on it together. Surround yourself with natural materials. Again, clothing, products, foods, and by natural materials with clothing, I think they make clothing from bamboo, obviously natural cottons, hemp. So there's a lot of like natural materials that you can make clothing from. Foods, how it's grown. It's not just like how it's grown and what pesticides and stuff they use on it. It's also the soil. So if the soil is contaminated, it actually won't get the organic certification. So sometimes something's been kind of exposed to a lot of pesticides, and then they think, okay, well, we're going to get rid of all this stuff now, we're going to start an organic farm, and then they test the soil, and the chemicals in the soil still last, and it's really, really difficult to get rid of. So it's almost like that soil is contaminated for years before they can kind of like cultivate it again and start growing organic again. So it's a real challenge. Examine your actions, behaviors, and try to get more aligned with your natural environment. So getting aligned with your natural environment, and when I say flow with nature, is like, try not to resist it. Like, when was the last time that you, for example, stood outside in the rain? Whenever it's rain, we all run, right? We like run. It rains and we run. It's like there's this fear of the rain. But it's water. You stand in it, you get wet, great. You go inside, you dry off, you have a shower, and life's still good. You know, so try to embrace the elements where you can, try to flow with it where you can, align yourself with the kind of sunrise and sunset, you know, rather than being up till 3 or 4 in the morning. You know, sun goes down at 6 or 7, stay up for another couple of hours, go to bed. As the sun rises, you rise with the sun. Get that early sunlight, the energy from the sun. If the plants are releasing that oxygen in the morning, breathe it in. If you have an apartment full of plants, you'll get the full benefit of that, because you'll actually oxygenate your apartment as well. Point, organic living may not actually be good for the economy, okay? So if there are any economists in here, I'm sorry, but when you're kind of mindful, you're buying less, you're only buying what you really need, the bare minimum, so that's not good for the kind of economy. The economy wants you to buy more and more. And you're buying better quality things, so you're not throwing a lot of stuff away. Sometimes they make things that last for 2 or 3 years, so you can throw it away and buy the new thing. Like most of my products are Apple, right? And I love Apple products, but I need to upgrade every couple of years. Now, it's not because they didn't have the technology then, it's because it's designed that way. They want you to buy something again in a couple of years. You update the software, all of a sudden there's not enough memory on your computer anymore, things are slow, you get really frustrated, like, I need a new computer. And you buy a new computer, right? And that's the way the economy is designed. So organic living may not necessarily be good for the economy, and you need to be very clear on that. But then you need to decide what you value most as a person and as a society. Do we value being able to trade and make a lot of money, or do we value kind of being aligned with nature, being healthy, happy, have strong connections? And that's a question that each of you has to answer for themselves. And just a final word. So this is a Native American proverb. Just read it and I'll read it out to you. When the last tree has been cut down, the last fish caught, the last river poisoned, only then will we realize that no one can eat money. So when I say about you don't need money to survive, I think they've captured it really, really well in the Native American kind of tradition. Only when the last tree has been cut down, the last fish caught, the last river poisoned, only then will you realize that you cannot eat money. And that kind of wraps it up. Does anyone have any questions or comments in general? Discussion to be had. So summarizing quickly, organic living for me goes well beyond just eating organic foods. It's about fundamentally getting aligned with how nature intended us to live. There is some discussion to be had around that in terms of your philosophy and your approach and your worldview, whether you believe that or not. I have friends that really believe in genetically modified food. They're like, we are humans, we are here to improve things, so we genetically modify things, we get more value out of it. And I have that argument. I was like, well, if you believe in God and God intended it that way, then he would have genetically modified it himself, you know. So there are discussions to be had around that, but my general worldview and my approach is that nature and the earth is there to sustain human life, and the more aligned we get with it, the happier we will be. Yes?
So, hi, and really thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one question.
Sure.
Does it, like, when you say go organic, does it always mean go vegan? Like, only eat vegetables?
No. No, for example, when you, sometimes, say you eat beef, a lot of it is also dependent on what the cow eats. So sometimes the cow is not being fed organic. Or for example, chickens. I have a cousin who has a chicken farm, and they give them hormones so they grow quicker, and the quicker they grow, the quicker they can sell them, the quicker they can bring money in. But you don't know what the hormones are that they're giving them. So they're not eating natural materials. So I suppose if you're a meat eater, that's completely fine, but I'd want to know what is the animal being fed? Is the animal eating organic or not? Does that make sense? So if it's an animal that's been naturally fed, and you'll see, I think there's a butcher here that sells meat, and they'll actually put on the label grass-fed meat. So that's what they're kind of alluding to. And you'll see that, and you can ask your butcher, what was this animal fed? And when I talked about being mindful about where your food comes from, that's what I meant. So you're eating this food, and it looks great, and it's great quality meat, but what was this animal fed? Where did it live? I eat meat, so I'm not a vegan or vegetarian or anything like that. I don't eat a lot of meat. And I don't know, I like the idea of kind of not harming animals. But I can respect the fact that if you do have, say, a sheep or a lamb or a goat, you've killed it, the whole family's been fed, and there's been like a direct connection between you and the animal, and you're very thankful for that nutrition or that sustenance that this animal has given you. I think there's a kind of I can live with that. But when you put them in factories, and you're like, bang, bang, yeah, there's no connection with the food anymore. You're disconnected from the food, and it becomes a commodity. And there's no like gratitude. It's like, and we waste a lot of food as well, you know. So, yeah. Did that answer your question, the first part? Yeah. Yes.
I just have a comment, and it's about you said that it's important to grow your own food.
Yes.
To regain that connection with nature.
Correct.
And to live minimalist. I would add to this also cooking your own food.
Ah, yes.
Because cooking the food at home, it helps you slow down the pace of your life by like reflecting and looking at the food when it's being cooked, and also helps you learn more and get more awareness about what's going in your plate.
Absolutely. So yeah, when you cook your own food, you actually you see the ingredients that go in there because you're actually putting the ingredients in there. So that's one thing. And the other part of it as well is that process that you worked for your food, and it took time to kind of, first of all, it's kind of therapeutic. I think it relaxes you. But second of all, because you worked for it, you're probably less likely to waste it or throw it away. So when you have food that's delivered to you quickly, you eat what you can and you throw the rest away. But when you've actually worked at something and you've kind of come up with this great thing and you're like, oh, I'm really full now, I don't really want to waste it. You don't want to just throw it away because you've put your heart and you put your soul into it. There's a lot of love in that food that you don't want to throw away. But great point. And understanding the ingredients that go into your food is really important too. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, go.
Yeah, I just want to add to what you said also.
Sure.
When you plant to make more food, it would take like one plant, example in apple, there's seeds inside, there's 4 inside. So if you might take the seeds from an apple, you can make another 4 apples, which can multiply, which if you multiply them, you can only feed yourself, you can feed your family and your friends if you want to.
Yeah, perfect. And it's kind of like investing your money in a bank, but you're investing with apple seeds, you know? No, he's very, very right. But if you can grow food in your local community that can feed your local community, then what else does that community need, really? Yes. Yes.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
You mentioned you were in Thailand, correct?
Yes, yes.
So what were you hoping to achieve there regarding working with those farmers or being there for, what was your focus or achievement there?
Yeah, I actually took a group, and most of them were from the UAE as well, and we went to a region called Chiang Rai, which was north, and it was really an educational experience for the people from here, and trying to see where the food comes from and how it's grown, and bridging that connection from farm to fork. So the whole kind of theme was farm to fork. So building the relationship with the farmers, seeing how they live, seeing how they grow the food, but then we're actually picking the food, and then we were cooking it and we were eating it. And then there was a whole education around that as well. Yeah, so that's what it was. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you so much for great
You're
session.
welcome. You're welcome.
Actually, during your presentation, your speech, I can imagine myself. I can't relate a lot to what you've mentioned from organic perspective.
Yeah, sure.
To be very closely with what you grow and what you eat. We still, يعني his late Sheikh Zayed, he had this culture here in UAE. Grow the sand, plant your own trees, and all this kind of initiatives, which actually changes our mindset. Now, for example, I'm from Al Ain, and we have this mindset back home.
Yes.
If you build your home, you have to have a good space at your home so you can grow your palm trees or grow your food. But at the same time, I see myself, I see my kids, I see the coming generation are being distant from there. Which brings me to my questions now. I'm interested in organic food. Sometimes when I have time, but sometimes, to be honest, it's very hard to find a good store that sells good organic food. And as you've mentioned, organic food is a bit expensive.
Yes, of course.
And you need to understand. Actually, you have to work your mind, you have to work yourself, and you have to go and search for all that.
Of course.
My question is, where does the organic industry or organic food industry going from having an affordable prices for having multiple stores around UAE? We started to see certain initiative. I don't know how much you are involved here in UAE, but we started to have to see certain initiatives from Mahsoul Mazari'na, which is local farms products, which is sold. I think it's organic, which is good.
Yes.
But again, it's expensive, a bit expensive, not much, and it's very limited. If you come in the morning, and then it's gone by noon. Where do you see this organic business coming, or industry, or how appealing is it actually for investors and for public?
Look, I think in the system that we live in and with the economy, it's all about supply and demand, right? So you'll actually notice now at Carrefour, they have an organic section. Have you seen that? Yeah, so not necessarily in the fruit and vegetables, but in the other aisles, they'll have a whole section that's dedicated to organic. So as more and more people ask for it, they're going to start providing it. So as demand goes up, you're going to see the supply increase. As the supply increases, then you're going to see the prices come down, right? But the issue, again, with organic food and why you might always have that increase in price is that when you are using certain fertilizers in the soil that are chemically based or pesticides that are killing the weeds and killing the bugs that might destroy the actual crop, you're actually increasing the crop. So the more chemicals you use, the more you're able to grow. And the reason they use the chemicals is so they can grow more. And if they grow more, then they can sell more. So it makes sense for them to use the chemicals. Now, if you don't use all the pesticides and stuff like that, then you're probably going to have a lot of your crops die just through natural processes. The insects infest them or whatever it might be, and a lot of your crops die, and then you can't sell the crops that have died. So this is a challenge too. Now, if you also see, like, for example, a peach or a nectarine, and you see one that's been organically grown, it's actually pretty small, right? You see the one that's not organically grown, it's about this big. And that's a really, really big difference. But the reason it's that big is because they want it to be that big because they sell it by the kilogram. So you buy 2 peaches, and you're like, I can't buy 2 peaches, I need at least 5 or 6. I have a big family, I need 10 or 15. But each one is bigger, your kilos goes up, they can charge you more. So it really is economic. It really, really is economic. Where the trends are going, it's really, really difficult to say. I think people are becoming more conscious, and with the new generation, the kind of 18 to 35-year-olds, the millennials, especially internationally, I'm not quite sure what the trends are here, but I'm guessing it's the same, is that they're becoming a lot more aware. And not only that, they only now want to support businesses that are socially conscious. So they would rather support a business that supports a cause than support a business that doesn't support a cause. So I feel the new generation, especially since 2008, as I mentioned, the new generation is a lot more conscious of these issues. And as people become more conscious and as they start demanding more, I think you're going to see the market come to the party, and then the prices are going to come down. But you're very lucky in LA, and you've got the natural water springs and everything like that. But yeah, if you can spend some time with your kids growing some food, it's a really good way to start. So I can't predict. If you're looking for organic investments, then yeah, that's a different story. But it's difficult to predict, so we'll see. We'll see. All done? Okay, thank you everyone. Thanks for your time.